Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about CMIS, Content Management Interoperability Services. So what does that mean? And remember, again, this is just a 50,000 foot view of this, but the basic idea. So it deals with content, and in the beginning, how we wrote maybe a website is, well, here's just a little sample. We have a index.jsp file, and inside there, business gave us these two PDF documents which we need to show to customers. So we copy them into a folder called content, and then we create a little link for them, content/sample1 and content/sample2. So very simple, and it looks something like this. Then if you click on it, there's the PDF document, and it pulls it up. Of course, it pulls it up from, as you can see, there's my WAR file, but it pulls it up from content.sample2.pdf. Okay. The issue though is that a business came to us and they kept changing these documents weekly, and we have kept having to put them in here, and then they wanted more and more and more, and in the end it becomes a complete nightmare for IT to control this content. That's just one case, but it can be many cases. It could even be dynamic content that's created, or reports, or anything like that, but copying them into a folder, doesn't work always, because if you consider a bigger server, let's say this is our server, and maybe it's an Apache server or something like that. So here's our PDF document 1, and in here goes our PDF document 2. So we keep having to add them to our server in the content folder here. But what if we start scaling, and we now have a 2 servers? Now we have to keep a copy on both those servers, because if we start load balancing between the servers, for instance, we don't really know where the content's going to come from, and that certainly creates problems for us, because now there's these documents everywhere. You could solve it, and this is the first stage maybe of solving it. As typically you would create maybe a share over here, but now this becomes a problem, because the customer doesn't have access to the share. So maybe you mount it on each one of these servers with a mount, but now it gets ugly. There's Unix mounts, and when you start changing technology, it just gets ugly. So and it gets ugly very quickly. So the thing here is, and this is one of the use cases then for content management services, is saying, yep, you still got your web server over here, but maybe you have more than one. Let's go. So maybe you have more than one web server, but these web servers now no longer talk to a local copy. Okay, so you start by creating this content management server, and you put your PDF documents in there. Now this content management server is maybe something like SharePoint, or something like FileNet, or something to that effect, which is a content management server. And what you do in front of that is you put the CMIS, Content Management Interoperability Services, and you load client applications or client libraries. Maybe you load onto your web servers. I'll show you now how that works, but what it basically means is these guys, the CMIS talks to each other, and all of them talk then to your content management server. To take this one step further is maybe this one is called SharePoint, but now your business comes to you and says, hey, but we also have some documents over there on our FileNet. So, and this is where this really gets really great, because maybe this is your FileNet server, which is a different service, or a different content management container or service, and maybe you can do this kind of thing. And what CMIS does really well is, it is a common interface to any one of these things at the back. So maybe they decide that, we're gonna ask you to pull in some documents from the cloud way over there, and maybe this one lives on the cloud. Maybe this one lives on the cloud, and what's nice about this is we don't really care. We talk to our CMIS common interface over here, and this common interface talks to any one of these services, content management services. And what's nice about this now is, there's maybe this is document number 5 and this is document number 6. It doesn't really matter where your document now lives, or your actual content. CMIS interoperability services can pull it for you onto your website. So it will pull it onto these guys for you, no matter where it lives in the back end, in which content management service. And what's nice is, of course, business can sit on this side of the equation, and they can be updating these documents all day long. And you don't really care much about it. You have already integrated your CMIS, content management services, and business updates those PDF documents inside those content management services. But to you, the developer over here, you don't really care all that much, because your world is really around your web service over here, and you've integrated to those content management services. So I hope that makes sense to you, and I'm trying to show the use case for this then. So how this typically then works is, you would start up a content management service, one of these. I started up the one from provided by Apache Chemistry, and it's just a little app. I used the Apache Chemistry one, which is just a little Tomcat application, or a WAR file that runs inside the Tomcat. And what that does is, it creates for you a CMIS server, and you tell it where the repository is, and you tell it that kind of thing. And then here's a typical CMIS client. From now on, my CMIS as an Atom publish. I've got a username, password. You can see that you can, of course, authenticate, OAuth, or there's other ways to authenticate with this CMS or CMIS service of yours. So basically, these guys each have created a CMIS implementation, and they stuck it on their servers. And they did something like that, and so they went and they created one for SharePoint, and they created one for FileNet, and they created one for your cloud, and they stuck it on there. And from that point onwards, really, you can talk to your service. So here's a little client that will do the Atom connection. So you'll see my repository on the server at the moment has 2 files in, sample 1 and sample 2. But this is not really covering the CMS part of it. I mean, my view at the moment is I'm looking at the content inside of these servers, And SharePoint could have its own browser, and FileNet has its own browser, and on a cloud there's some other browser. There's all sorts of browsers to look at your content on there, but they all expose their content with this CMIS, let's call it connector or something like that. So once I've done that, I can use a client like this, which is a CMIS client, fat client. So I can browse those repositories, and I can browse the content in there, and I can see here I've got something. I can go create an object. I can go go create a folder, and I can call the folder test, and there it is. And now we can see there's a folder test. It's almost like a file system, but it's content inside there. And I can take something like that, and I can go say, well, delete it. It has versioning. These are typical things that content management services has. But there's a document, and there's its properties. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do with this. Generate thumbnails for it, all sorts of things. But that's typical content management. Now, the issue in the past has been, if you then want to take this content management data and get it onto your web server, you had to write a very specific piece of code that would talk to, say, FileNet, or you would have to write a different one to talk to SharePoint. So CMIS though went and said, you know what, we'll give you a common interface. You talk to this, and in the back end we'll talk to all these providers for you. So it basically is one interface to any one of these content management services out there. So how that's implemented then over here on our little JSP page, and this is actually getting it to work here. Here we're gonna maybe say, I'm gonna mark out our old menu over there, and I'm gonna go to a new. And the new menu, perhaps there's here I'm gonna do a folder listing, and here you're gonna see I'm calling, and in my case I'm calling a servlet, but hey, this could have been there's implementations for .NET, there's Java. You could have rolled this into a Angular app. There's lots of things that will talk CMIS, but I'm just going to show a very simplistic version that talks to a servlet, the ultimate servlet. So here's my servlet context, and I call it get PDF1 and get PDF2. So and in those guys, and in this case now, I don't need this content here anymore. This content can really go away, but you'll see that I have my content pointed. There's my JSP, and then inside the servlet is where the actual thing now happens. So this is the client code, and there's my URL. There's my username and password, but again you could use other type of authentication. Here's my repository, it's called test. So I could create sessions to other things. I don't just have to create it to this one. I could send a session to this guy, and that guy, all three at the same time, and put it each in a session. So the session part you typically want to do only once in the beginning. So now you have a session to those content management services, and here's an implementation of listing maybe, and here's an implementation of actually pulling the PDF. So the PDF, what it does is actually gonna, and there's cache and all sorts of things involved, but what it actually does is it's gonna actually, when you click to view the document, it's actually gonna via CMIS reach out to the content management server and stream the document for you and present it in the web browser. So if I ask for PDF1, this document, in the future I will no longer be pulling it from a local folder on these web servers, I will actually be streaming it from this content management server. It will be streamed to any one of these services via CMIS. So how that's then implemented, if I go into my little application over here, and I'm gonna go kill this content because I don't need that content there anymore. I'm gonna say fine. Now really all I have is the servlet and my web page, and my old menu goes away, and now I just have a pointing to a servlet with a get PDF1 and a get PDF2, and in here when I do my get PDF1, I'm going to stream my PDF from my content management server, which the session I created from there. So that's the basic idea behind it. So I'm going to quickly deploy that and get that up and running. So here's my old menu. I'm going to refresh it now. There's my new menu. So here's the API call to do a folder listing, and there we can see in that folder are two documents, sample 1 and sample 2. But maybe business comes from here and says, you know what, we want to create a new folder, and we want to call it testing folder, and they create that folder. If I now do an API call there, we can see a folder suddenly appears in my API listing. So that just shows that this CMIS client now reaches out to CMIS, talks to that server. Business is coming here and altered the content over here, and I can immediately view on my front end the content changing. So here, if I'm gonna, this time I'm going to stream the PDF, and that's just my router's PDF. This one is my child's algebra, but you'll note that it says get PDF2. It's actually no longer a link to an actual PDF document. This actually goes to a servlet, and the servlet in return, the servlet that lives on here in return talks to CMIS, creates this session to this server, and then pulls this PDF1 or PDF document, streams it from there all the way through to the web server, whichever web server the client came in on, and displays it to him. So that way there is now a very nice split between what I'm doing up front here, building a website with content in there, and what business does in the back here, maintaining their content across all these servers. So if you then click over there, of course it streams it, it caches it locally. There's a whole lot of, but when it changes and the version changes, it can also automatically update. So for instance, if business had to come and put a new version of this document out there, you can see as versions. If I create a new version of this document, I will automatically get the latest version in the website up front here. I don't have to go change anything. Business has gone and updated the version of this document. They have both versions, the old and the new, but I could just pull the head version, meaning the top version, and display that. But to me, from the web development side, I don't know that's happening, and I don't really care. Business can go into the back end and update these documents and put new versions and whatever they want, as much as they want, and I make no changes up front here. There's nothing that I need to do in front here to actually get those updates, and I don't even deal with the content because they don't live on my servers anymore. They are on the back end, and of course the client who's out here, they never get really in contact with these. These can be secure internal servers with firewalls in between, and the client actually never has a direct connection with those servers. They they don't actually talk to those servers at any point. There can be firewalls in between, and there's only a single port that's opened, and in this case, if we look at the code, I think I'm running it on port 8080. Is my local CMIS, or my repository is over there. So the client never physically talks to my content in the back end. They talk to my web service, and my web service will, on the client's behalf, go through the firewalls, go to this content management that's on my internal network and where business works, or maybe on the cloud where business works, pull the content for me, and then stream it for me to the client. So that's the basic idea of that CMIS there. The code is really, really simple. It really just says there's a document, and in this case I opted to look up the document by name or by but I could have looked up the document by ID. I can give it the ID. I can look it up by that specific ID, so we agree that this will be the ID and it never changes, and doesn't matter what version you put out there, I will always get that specific ID or that specific document. If new ones, I just have to create links to new IDs or whatever. Of course, this also supports pushing content in there. I can programmatically from my website push content in there and pull content from there. I'm just showing PDF documents here, but it could have been images, it could have been video files, it could have been all sorts of content that you don't want to house, of course, on your servers, on your web service over here. You want to house them way out here on these big content management servers, which you don't have to really worry about, and they can be huge and have lots of space. But for you, from a web server side, you don't really care about that. You're really just gonna stream the content when you're asked to stream it, and the documents no longer live here. So that's my 50,000 foot overview. This barely scratches the surface, of course, of what this is. There's a lot more to do, and a lot more that can be done. Searches and like I said earlier, thumbnails and all sorts of things, previews and pushing, pulling, it goes crazy. But there's just a very simple practical implementation of using something like Apache Chemistry to get content onto your web server, and removing that from your actual application, or from the developer, so that he does not have to deal with the content inside of his world over here. So thank you, and see you soon.